The storm outside raged like it wanted to rip the city apart, but nothing hit me harder than the sight on my phone screen. Through the grainy glow of the security camera, I saw my father, Richard Carter, fling open the back door and shove my grandfather, Henry, into the freezing rain. My mother, Linda, just stood there, her face blank, her silence louder than the thunder. My grandfather's frail body shook beneath the downpour, his silver hair plastered to his forehead as if he were nothing more than a burden they wanted to cast aside. I froze, breath trapped in my chest, torn between disbelief and horror. That night burned into my memory, carving scars I will never forget. Weeks later, he died in my arms. But before he left, he gave me something, an old suitcase, filled with secrets, and a final wish that would silence the entire room. When I was little, the ranch in Sheridan County wasn't just land, it was my whole world. My grandfather, Henry Carter, called it our family's heartbeat, and I believed him. Those wide Wyoming fields held more than cattle and fences. They held the laughter of my childhood, the lessons that shaped me, and the steady voice of the man who became my true father figure. I still remember the way dawn felt on my skin when Grandpa nudged me awake at 5 a.m. "Come on, Emily," he'd whisper, handing me a pair of gloves far too big for my small hands. Cows don't wait for anyone. I'd stumble outside, half asleep, the air sharp and cold, only to watch him move with ease, calloused hands fixing ropes, firm steps crunching over the frost. He never complained, never sighed the way my father always did. For Grandpa, work was love made visible. While other kids played with dolls or video games, my playtime was climbing hay bales, chasing stray calves, and learning how to patch a broken fence with wire and grit. Grandpa turned every chore into a story. "Your grandmother used to hold the lantern while I hammered these posts," he'd say, eyes softening at the memory. "This place isn't just wood and nails, it's us, it's our story." He was a strict man, yes, but his discipline came wrapped in warmth. If I forgot to shut the gate and a calf wandered off, he didn't yell. He'd walk beside me into the field, lantern swinging, and say, "Mistakes are teachers, Emily. Learn quick, and you'll grow strong." His voice carried no judgment, only the weight of wisdom earned through storms, droughts, and 78 years of surviving life the hard way. Those lessons etched themselves into my bones. They were the compass that guided me when the world outside the ranch felt cruel and hollow. My parents, Richard and Linda, rarely visited the ranch unless they wanted something. They hated the dirt, the early mornings, the silence broken only by wind and cattle. But me? I thrived there. The ranch was where I felt seen, where Grandpa's steady hand on my shoulder told me I belonged. Even as he grew older, his steps slower, his breath heavier, Grandpa carried himself with dignity. He still fed the chickens, still walked the perimeter of the fields with his old cane tapping the earth. And when he sat on the porch at sunset, watching the horizon turn gold, I could see the pride in his eyes. He wasn't proud of money, he never had much, but proud of legacy, of a family name tied to the soil. I thought the ranch would always be ours. I thought no storm, literal or within the family, could tear it from us. But I was wrong. My father saw the land not as history, but as a price tag. And that difference would shatter everything. If the ranch was my sanctuary, it was my parents' prison. My father, Richard Carter, grew up on the same land I adored, but he hated every blade of grass. He told me countless times, his voice dripping with bitterness, "Do you know what it's like to wake up at 4 in the morning, every damn day, just to milk cows in freezing weather? That ranch stole my youth, Emily. I'll never forgive it." Where Grandpa saw honor, my father saw chains. He escaped as soon as he could, moving us to Billings, Montana, where he opened a restaurant. It was supposed to be his ticket to comfort and wealth, but instead, it limped along, sometimes busy, often empty. He put on a smile for customers, but behind closed doors, he raged about debts, taxes, and his dream of living in a big house with a brand new car in the driveway. My mother, Linda, shared his hunger for more. By day, she worked as a hairdresser, adored by her clients for her charm and easy laughter. But at home, she was different, sharp, restless, her eyes glinting with resentment when she looked at Grandpa. If Henry sold that ranch, things would be easier for all of us. I once overheard her whisper to Dad in the kitchen. Her words sliced through me. Grandpa wasn't a problem to solve. He was the heart of our family. But to her, he was an obstacle standing between her and the life she believed she deserved. It wasn't that my parents were cruel in the way villains are in books. It was worse, they were ordinary people consumed by ordinary greed. They wanted vacations in California, designer clothes, dinner parties where they could brag about their new furniture. They wanted the image of success without the work, and to them, Grandpa's ranch was a locked treasure chest they believed belonged to them. When they visited the ranch, their affection always felt rehearsed. Dad would lean forward, his voice soft and sugary. "You've worked your whole life, Dad. Isn't it time to rest? Sell the ranch. Move closer to us. We'll take care of you." Mom would nod vigorously beside him, her smile stretched too wide. "Think of Emily. Think of the hospitals in the city, the comfort you'll have." But I saw through it. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Their words weren't soaked in love, they were drenched in calculation. They didn't care about Grandpa's health. They cared about the ranch's worth. $3.2 million. Enough to wipe away Dad's debts, enough to fund Mom's dream of a grand life. And yet, despite all their smooth words, Grandpa resisted. His voice, though tired, carried conviction. "This land is not just soil. It's our family's honor. Selling it would be selling our story." His defiance lit a fire in me, but it also lit rage in my father's eyes. I should have realized then how far my parents were willing to go. I should have seen the storm gathering long before it broke. The visits grew more frequent. At first, they came once a month, but soon it was every other week. I could feel it, the shift in the air whenever their car rolled up the dirt driveway. They weren't there for family dinners or to share stories by the fireplace. They came armed with persuasion, their words sharp as knives wrapped in velvet. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table, watching my father slide a glossy brochure across to Grandpa. It was a picture of a luxury senior community in the city. "Look at this, Dad," Richard said smoothly, as if he were selling a vacation package. "Spacious rooms, daily meals, doctors on call. You'll never have to shovel snow or fix fences again." Grandpa studied the page quietly, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't answer right away, so my mother leaned forward, her tone dripping with false concern. "Henry, you can't keep living out here alone. What if something happens in the night? What if you fall and no one finds you? Selling the ranch means peace of mind for all of us." I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat frozen, my nails digging into the wood of my chair. Their words were calculated, rehearsed, and the worst part? They used me as bait. "Emily is busy with her life," Dad said, his eyes flicking toward me. "Do you really want her to carry the burden of worrying about you?" Grandpa's eyes flickered to mine, and I shook my head slightly, begging him to see through their manipulation. His lips tightened, and he finally spoke. "This land is my life. It's where your mother is buried. I won't abandon it." For a moment, I thought his words would end the matter. But my parents didn't retreat, they regrouped. Each visit became more intense. They painted pictures of wealth, of comfort, of how the money could solve every problem. I overheard arguments late at night. Dad pacing in the living room hissing, "3.2 million, Linda. That's our way out. If he keeps clinging to that land, we're stuck here forever." Mom's voice, lower but just as sharp. "Then push harder. He's old. He'll give in." The pressure wore him down. I saw it in the way his shoulders slumped, the way his eyes drifted to the fields at sunset as though saying goodbye. He began asking me questions that broke my heart. "Emily, do you think your parents would really take care of me? Maybe they're right. Maybe I should let go." I wanted to shout the truth that they were wolves circling their prey, but I couldn't bring myself to shatter his faith in his own son. Instead, I held his hand and whispered, "Whatever you decide, I'll stand by you." And so, one cold afternoon, the papers were signed. My father's smile stretched wide as the lawyer handed him the contract. $3.2 million wired directly into his account. Grandpa's voice shook as he said the words that haunt me still. "I don't need riches, just keep your promise. Care for me until the end." Dad nodded. Mom squeezed Grandpa's hand. But I saw it, the glint in their eyes. They had won. And, deep inside, I knew the cost would be far greater than money. The money changed everything overnight. Within weeks, my parents moved us into a gleaming 3-story house on the edge of Billings. Its white painted walls glistened in the sun, the windows wide and polished like they belonged in a magazine. A brand new SUV sat proudly in the driveway, its chrome catching every light. Mom paraded guests through the living room, her voice brimming with pride. "Now we can finally live the way we deserve," she said, gesturing toward the Italian leather sofa. To outsiders, we were the picture of success. Dad bragged to neighbors about his sacrifice in taking care of his father. "He doesn't have to worry about anything anymore," Richard would declare with a noble smile. "We take care of everything." And Mom would nod beside him, eyes misty, adding, "Henry worked his whole life. Now it's time for him to rest." People clapped them on the back, told them how admirable they were. But inside the walls of that house, the truth cracked through like hairline fractures in glass. Grandpa was given a small room on the second floor. At first, it seemed decent clean bed, a view of the backyard garden. But within days, I noticed how his space slowly shrank. Boxes began piling up in the corner. Old furniture my parents didn't want in the living room ended up pressed against his walls. Soon his room looked less like a bedroom and more like a storage closet with a bed shoved inside. Meals became another battleground. While my parents hosted dinner parties with steaks, wine, and desserts, Grandpa was often left with a bowl of thin soup or a dry piece of bread. Once, I found him struggling to carry a glass of water from the kitchen. His hands trembled, droplets spilling onto the floor. Mom's sigh cut through the air like a whip. "Dad, just leave it. You're too clumsy to do anything right." He lowered his head, forcing a smile, but his eyes betrayed the wound. They began calling him names when they thought I wasn't listening. "That old man," Dad muttered one night. "Always in the way," Mom whispered back. "If he weren't here, we'd have so much more freedom." I tried to defend him, to remind them of their promise, but Dad shut me down with icy words. "He gave me the money himself, Emily. I don't owe him anything." Each syllable felt like a blade twisting in my chest. Grandpa never complained to me, but his silence spoke volumes. I'd find him sitting in his cramped room, staring at a photo of Grandma, his lips moving in whispers I couldn't hear. When I asked if he was okay, he'd smile faintly. "I don't want to be a burden." But I knew the truth. He wasn't a burden. He was their father. And yet, in this house of glass, my parents polished their image for the world while shoving him deeper into the shadows. The storm that would shatter everything was coming. I could feel it. The night it happened, the sky itself seemed to mirror the turmoil inside our home. Winds howled against the glass panes, rattling them as if they might shatter. Rain pounded the roof with a relentless fury. I sat curled on my bed, phone in hand, anxiety gnawing at me. For weeks, I had been checking the security cameras I'd secretly installed after too many uneasy nights. That evening, something in my chest told me to look. The screen lit up with the dim glow of the kitchen. My grandfather sat hunched at the table, a bowl of cold soup before him. His hands trembled as he tried to lift the spoon. My father loomed nearby, arms crossed, his posture stiff with irritation. My mother stood by the door, eyes flat, offering no comfort. "Richard," Grandpa's voice wavered, soft but steady. "I don't want to be a bother. I just need my medicine, maybe a little bread." My father's lip curled. "You're always asking for something. Haven't we done enough for you? We gave you a roof. Isn't that enough?" I gripped my phone tighter, my breath shallow. Then it happened. Grandpa's hands shook too hard. The bowl slipped from his grasp, shattering on the tiled floor. Soup splattered across his feet. The sound of ceramic breaking seemed to ignite my father's rage. His face flushed crimson. "Can't you do anything right?" he roared. The storm outside thundered, but even nature's fury couldn't drown out his voice. He grabbed Grandpa's frail arm with terrifying force. Grandpa's eyes widened, his lips forming an apology. But my father didn't care. He yanked him toward the back door, each step a betrayal. "No," I whispered, my voice breaking even though they couldn't hear me. "Please, don't." On the screen I saw it. The door flung open, the black maw of the storm beyond. Wind howled into the kitchen, rain spraying in. My father shoved him out as though discarding trash. Grandpa stumbled, clutching his thin coat to his chest, his body swallowed by the downpour. My mother appeared briefly in the frame, but she didn't move to help. She just watched. The door slammed shut. My hands trembled so violently that my phone almost slipped. The image burned into my mind, my grandfather, the man who raised me with love and integrity, thrown into the storm by his own son. I didn't think. I acted. I snatched my car keys, bolted down the stairs of my apartment, and into the tempest. Rain lashed my face, soaking me instantly, but I barely felt it. My pickup truck skidded on slick streets, windshield wipers shrieking, headlights barely cutting through the sheets of water. My heart pounded louder than the storm. I pressed the gas harder, fear propelling me forward. Every second mattered. Every image of Grandpa shivering on that porch drove me faster. When I reached the house, I didn't even park properly. I jumped out, rain stinging my skin, hair plastered to my cheeks. My shoes splashed through puddles as I sprinted to the backyard. And there he was. Grandpa sat, slumped beneath a tree near the fence, as if the branches could shield him from the downpour. His coat clung to his body, water dripping from his silver hair. His chest rose and fell shallowly. He looked like a child abandoned in the storm. "Grandpa!" I screamed, my voice cracking. I stumbled through the mud, fell to my knees beside him, and wrapped my arms around his freezing frame. His body shook violently. "Emily," he whispered, voice faint as the wind roared around us. "What are you doing? It's dangerous." "I don't care," I cried, tears mixing with the rain. "You're coming with me. You're not staying here another second." He clung to me weakly, his fingers icy against my arm. I pulled him up, every ounce of strength in me fighting the storm. Slowly, step by agonizing step, I guided him toward the truck. When I finally got him inside, I wrapped him in an old blanket from the back seat, my hands trembling as I tucked it around him. His breathing was shallow, his skin frighteningly cold. As I slammed the door and ran around to the driver's side, I cast one glance back at the house. It loomed in the storm, its pristine white walls glowing under flashes of lightning. To the world it was a symbol of success, but to me, it was nothing but a prison, a place where promises had been broken, where love had been replaced by greed. I turned the key, the engine roared, and I drove us away. That night, the storm outside raged, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside me. Rage, fear, determination. My parents had crossed the line. And I swore on every drop of rain that hit the windshield, I would never let them hurt him again. When I brought Grandpa into my small apartment, it felt like dragging a wounded soldier from the battlefield. He was soaked through, his frail body trembling, his lips pale as parchment. I guided him to my single bed, ignoring his weak protests. "Emily, you'll sleep on the floor," he whispered, clutching my wrist with cold fingers. "I can't take your bed." "Stop," I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "I've slept on worse. You're not arguing with me tonight." I fetched a towel, gently drying his hair, then rummaged through my closet for the thickest clothes I owned. I helped him into an oversized sweatshirt and sweatpants. He looked almost childlike in them, the fabric hanging loose on his thin frame. That night, I sat on the floor, back against the wall, listening to the storm beat against the window. Grandpa's breathing was ragged, punctuated by coughs that shook his whole body. Every sound twisted my insides. I wanted to cry, to scream, to call my parents and curse them, but I stayed quiet, holding his hand until sleep finally stole him away. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of care. I woke early to make him tea, added honey the way Grandma used to. I cooked simple meals, vegetable soup, porridge, scrambled eggs, anything soft enough for him to eat. Sometimes he finished a bowl and gave me a faint smile. "You're a better cook than you think," he teased, his voice raspy but warm. Other times, he barely touched the food. His hands trembled too much to hold a spoon. I fed him slowly, one bite at a time, pretending not to notice his shame. I worked extra Uber shifts to cover his medicine, driving until dawn and stumbling home exhausted. But no matter how tired I was, I sat with him, listening to his stories. He'd point at the photo of Grandma I'd placed on the nightstand and whisper, "She used to hum while making biscuits. I can still hear it sometimes." His eyes would shine, and I'd squeeze his hand tighter, afraid to let go. But his health spiraled quickly. Each day he grew weaker. His coughs deepened, sometimes so violent I thought he might break apart. One morning, I found him gripping the edge of the table, gasping for air. Terror clawed at me. I rushed him to the hospital. The doctor, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, examined him carefully before pulling me aside. His voice was low, but his words slammed into me like bricks. "Your grandfather is very frail. Exposure to cold and stress has accelerated his decline. We can provide supplements, pain relief, but you should prepare yourself. He may not have much time." I stood there frozen, the sterile smell of disinfectant choking me. "How long?" I whispered. "Weeks. Maybe less," the doctor said softly. "Spend as much time as you can with him." I nodded, numb. My chest felt hollow, as if the storm that nearly drowned us had carved me out from the inside. Back home, I sat beside Grandpa's bed, fighting back tears. He looked at me, his eyes gentle but dimmed by exhaustion. "Emily," he murmured, reaching for my hand, "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving you sad." My throat burned. I pressed his hand to my cheek. "Don't say that. I'm not ready. I'll never be ready." He smiled faintly, stroking my hair with trembling fingers. "You're stronger than you think. Promise me you won't let bitterness eat you alive. Promise me you'll fight with truth, not anger." I wanted to argue, to beg him to stay, but the words wouldn't come. I just nodded through the tears spilling down my face. In the nights that followed, I did everything I could to make him comfortable. I played the old westerns he loved, holding the remote as he pointed at the screen and whispered memories. I kept soup warm on the stove, though he barely ate. I rubbed his back when the coughing fits came, whispering that it would be okay even as my heart knew otherwise. Each morning I woke in the armchair beside his bed, praying it hadn't been his last night. Each evening I watched his chest rise and fall, counting every fragile breath, as if keeping score against death itself. And though I fought, I knew the truth. The storm my father unleashed on that night had stolen more than warmth. It had stolen the last of Grandpa's strength. I just didn't know when it would take him completely. The day of Grandpa's funeral felt like a play staged for an audience. White lilies lined the walls of the chapel, soft hymns filled the air, and my parents stood at the front, draped in black, their faces composed masks of grief. My father delivered a eulogy smooth as glass. Henry Carter lived a full life. We cared for him until the very end. His voice trembled at all the right moments, but I knew it was an act. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, sighing as if her heart were breaking. Neighbors nodded, whispering about their devotion. I sat in the back row, fists clenched, my chest burning with silent rage. If only they had seen the storm. If only they knew what really happened. But I kept my head bowed. Grandpa wouldn't want me to cause a scene, not on the day he was laid to rest. That night, after the mourners left and the house was quiet, I returned to my apartment. The silence felt heavier than ever. I busied myself tidying the small space, desperate to keep moving. That's when I noticed the suitcase tucked beneath Grandpa's bed, where I had placed his belongings weeks before. It was old, its leather cracked, the brass clasps dull with age. My hands trembled as I pulled it out, heart pounding as though I were trespassing on sacred ground. Inside were folded clothes, neatly stacked notebooks, and at the very bottom, an envelope with my name written in his shaky handwriting. I sank to the floor, tears already blurring my vision. With careful hands I opened it. "My dearest Emily," the letter began. "By the time you read this, I may no longer be here. I have little strength left, but I could not leave without telling you the truth. I know your father never cared for me the way I hoped he would. I wanted to believe in him, but I was wrong. Forgive me for trusting too much. Forgive me for making you witness so much pain. But don't let grief consume you. Don't let anger turn you bitter. Use truth as your weapon. In this suitcase, you'll find everything I've kept hidden. These are not riches, but they are my legacy. Protect our family's honor. I love you, always, Grandpa." My tears stained the paper, smudging the ink. I pressed the letter to my chest, as if holding it could bring him back. Beneath the letter lay a thick folder filled with documents. My breath caught as I flipped through them. The contract for the ranch sale, bank statements, receipts, and then I found his diary pages filled with his shaky but steady handwriting, chronicling every insult, every moment of neglect, every time my parents treated him like a burden. Today, Richard yelled at me for spilling water. Linda sighed and told me to fend for myself. I don't want to be a bother, but I feel so tired. The soup was cold again tonight. I miss the warmth of home, the porch, the sound of your grandmother humming. Each entry stabbed at me, sharper than any blade. This wasn't just a record, it was a testimony. A cry for justice left behind in ink and paper. And then, at the back of the folder, I found something else. A signed clause in the ranch sale contract. My father had agreed to care for Grandpa until his final days in exchange for the $3.2 million. It wasn't just a moral promise. It was a legal one. And he had broken it. I sat on the floor for hours, the letter and diary spread before me, the storm of emotions crashing inside. Grief, anger, guilt, but beneath it all, a spark of something else, resolve. Grandpa had given me his final wish. He hadn't asked me to avenge him with violence or hatred. He asked me to fight with truth. The next morning, I carried the suitcase to a law office downtown. The name on the door read, Michael Turner, attorney at law, a man known for fighting cases of elder abuse. His office smelled of old books and fresh coffee. When I placed the folder on his desk and slid the USB drive with the security footage toward him, he raised his brows. "Emily," he said after skimming the first few pages, his tone steady but firm, "you have a strong case. Your father and mother didn't just mistreat your grandfather, they broke a legally binding contract. This diary, these bank statements, and this video, they're irrefutable." The room spun around me, but I held onto the chair for balance. But suing my own parents? My voice cracked, the weight of the words crushing me. Michael leaned forward, his eyes steady. "This isn't about tearing your family apart. It's about honoring the man who raised you. It's about justice." I closed my eyes, hearing Grandpa's voice in my heart. "Let truth be your weapon." When I opened them, my tears had dried. "Then let's do it," I whispered. "For him." The fire in my chest ignited. I knew this would break what little remained of our family. I knew the whispers in town would call me ungrateful, cruel, even heartless. But I also knew one thing. I wouldn't let Grandpa's final wish die in silence. The day of the trial, the courthouse buzzed with whispers. Neighbors, old family friends, and curious strangers filled the benches. Some looked at me with pity, others with judgment. But I kept my chin high, clutching Grandpa's diary and the letter close to my chest. My parents sat across the room. Richard's jaw was set, his eyes blazing with fury. Linda kept dabbing her eyes with a tissue, but I could see the steel behind her performance. To the world, they still wanted to look like the grieving, noble caretakers. Michael Turner rose, his voice steady. "Your Honor, we are here because Henry Carter was deceived, exploited, and neglected. He sold his ranch under the promise of care, until his death, a promise his own son and daughter-in-law broke. We have the contract, the diary, the financial records, and video evidence of Miss Carter being forced out into a storm." Gasps rippled through the room as the footage played on the large screen. My father dragging Grandpa to the door slamming shut, my mother standing still. The sound of rain and Grandpa's faint apology filled the silence. I couldn't watch. I lowered my head, tears sliding down my face. But I heard the shift in the room, the disbelief, the anger. For once, the truth was undeniable. My parents' lawyer tried to dismiss it as a moment of frustration, but the judge's stern gaze said otherwise. She read the contract aloud, her voice sharp. "In exchange for the transfer of the Carter Ranch, Richard Carter and Linda Carter agree to provide full care and housing until Henry Carter's passing." My father stood, shouting, "He gave me the money willingly. We did our best." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Enough. When the verdict came, the room fell utterly silent. "This court declares the sale of the Carter Ranch void due to undue influence, coercion, and breach of contract. The property and assets shall revert to Henry Carter's estate. His granddaughter, Emily Carter, is named rightful heir. I felt my knees weaken, but strength surged through me. Grandpa's voice echoed in my heart. Let truth be your weapon. Richard slammed his fist on the table. Linda wept into her hands, but I didn't look at them. Instead, I looked at the empty seat beside me, imagining Grandpa's warm smile. In the weeks that followed, I founded the Henry Carter Foundation, dedicated to protecting the elderly from neglect and abuse. Part of the inheritance went toward rebuilding a small cabin on the land where Grandpa and Grandma once stood proud. On the memorial stone, I carved the words he lived by. True value lies not in money, but in how we treat family. Each time I stand there, the Wyoming wind brushing against my face, I whisper, I kept my promise, Grandpa. And in the silence of that wide, open field, I swear I can feel him smiling.